Recording in progress.
Bam.
Hello, good morning and or afternoon, technically 8 minutes afternoon in the East Coast area of Rhode Island. Everyone tunes in for their time check. This is Time Zone Check with Dwight and Nikolai. Really glad to have you on. Nikolai Blanau is joining. She is a therapist, a life coach, and all-around pretty cool person, I'm finding. We were introduced through Chris Revel and the wonderful Rhode Island podcast community. Are you in Rhode Island? I guess I assumed.
I'm totally in Rhode Island, and actually, I don't live far from Chris, so I see him actually quite frequently now at the coffee shop down the street from my house.
Oh, how would you characterize
that is how
him
close
as a
we
neighbor?
are. He's good. I mean, I don't know. I don't live close enough to really know his ins and outs of daily life.
I got to get that dirt. There's enough podcasters in Rhode Island, it seems. You guys have quite a thriving community there.
We do. And I think it's Providence as a city is a very art-centric, creative city. Sometimes people like to call Providence the creative capital. I think part of it is probably we have RISD here, which is the Rhode Island School of Design. So we have a lot of people who come in who are creatives to go to that school. And we also have Brown University as well, which I think tends to attract a lot of creative people, even though, obviously they can major in whatever they want. But Brown has a certain vibe to it that also tends to attract, I think, cool people. And some of them stay, which is nice.
Creative capital of the world or just of Rhode Island? Or the nation, I guess.
Who knows? When you dub yourself the creative capital, I guess you can say whatever you want.
I like it, though.
We did, though, in 2010, so it's been a while. Travel and Leisure magazine did name Providence the #1 food city in the United States.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can say we have claim to being #1 in something in the entire country.
Wow. All right. Okay. Well, I didn't know that. We'll have to put that out there. Listeners, how do you feel about that tweet at Nikolai Blanau? No, I don't know your Twitter off the top of my head. Anyway. Tweet. Send all your angry tweets. Constructive, productive tweets. All you can send to me, but we don't want to hear those. We don't want to hear that negativity. But that's wonderful. There are a lot of good food places around, and so it's good to be there. Well, we're talking about caretaker burnout and burnout in general today. What do you want to take the time as we're transitioning into that? To tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your practice, where you came from, all the details of your upbringing and of your career, maybe some credit card numbers, whatever you want to throw out. Most people do some of those. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in some ways, I feel like I came non-traditionally to the world of being a therapist. So my dad is an immigrant from Eastern Europe, hence why I have the name Nikolai. And because of that, just had a lot of super fun wartime trauma experiences that followed, my grandparents and family here to the United States. So I got a lot of early childhood messaging that making sure I worked really hard to be super stable was important. And that I just needed to get a nice, safe corporate gig where I had great benefits and I could just carry my metaphorical briefcase to work every day, earn my paycheck, and not have to have things be so hard and unpredictable. So I did that, and I had a career. Actually, I worked at Brown University in development and institutional advancement, which is basically fundraising. And I loved Brown a lot, but I didn't love my desk job. So I did some soul searching, and I really questioned what it was I liked about my job, what didn't feel so fulfilling to my job. And what I came to was I loved the part of my job where I got to meet with people. My job involved meeting with a lot of alumni and students and getting to know the community. And I loved that. But I didn't love the part that I had to just ask them for money for a really specific purpose, fundraising.
I remember looking for jobs way back when, and as I worked in education as well, and I'd look at different positions, and I don't know why, just ignorance for a while. I mean, technically, of course, ignorance because I didn't know it, but I for a long time, for a while, it took me to realize that development meant asking people for money. Every time it's like foundational development. Ooh, that sounds good. What, organizational planning? Now you go and tell people give us money, or you organize events where hopefully you break even or make a little money, but it looks good. Sorry, that's a cynical take on it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even if you work for an organization that you really believe in and you love, it's just sometimes that energy of, I want something from you.
And some people are really good. Some people are really
Yes.
gifted at it. And I've seen that happen where, they had that marketing vibe and this actually makes sense from the messaging conversations we've had through Chris, and you had mentioned a couple of tips to me just recently about, oh, this is how I market, and I was like, whoa, that's I never would have thought of those things that you think are simple ideas, and I wonder, did you gain some of that business background then and carry that into what you do now?
Yeah, and I think I'm in a women's business group, and we had a meeting yesterday. And I was just saying that in our meeting that in a lot of ways, I feel blessed that I've gained a lot of skills that the traditional therapist doesn't have because of my first career in marketing and development and a more traditional business setting. And I think that helps me just as someone who's running my own business. And I also think it helps me when I'm sort of serving my clients, who are also small business owners themselves or trying to find balance in the corporate sector. Like, I've been there, I've done the thing. So I have a bit more understanding, I think, than the therapist who's just been a lifetime therapist.
Yeah. That's, and it sounds like maybe we are, on the verge of talking about some burnout here as well. Maybe I'm getting a hint. I'm not Sherlock Holmes, but I'm getting a hint that maybe your career included a little of that. You weren't loving what you were doing, but would you say, was it a burnout situation for yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like they say everything in retrospect. I don't think I knew ever I was burnt out, but I feel like my sort of early childhood experience, having grandparents and a parent and aunts and uncles who are immigrants, like part of my struggle has been, I have such a natural drive that comes with that. And then also being in a very performance oriented corporate setting. Brown is a great institution. They're an Ivy League institution. And they take the work that they do very seriously. So, I had just lots of tension headaches back in the day, which were, I think, an indicator that I was pretty burnt out. Just difficulty slowing down and knowing when to kind of put the pedal on the gas and when to pull back. But I don't think I ever knew that I was burnt out. I don't think burnout was what led me to my career change. So obviously, I think I wanted to do work to me that felt more meaningful and fulfilling.
Yeah.
Because I thought, if I'm going to be doing this job thing for my entire adult life, I think the rest of my life would also feel a lot better if I really loved going to work every day.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's interesting to look, and I'm sure we'll get into that as far as what to do and things. But when you said carrying that I almost said metaphysical, carrying that metaphorical briefcase, the thing that popped in my head immediately was, a metaphorical briefcase can hold a whole lot more than a regular briefcase. In other words, we can walk into a situation with, boy, there's a bottomless pit of, you can fill up as much as you want to try to do. And I think especially nowadays, the tech it exists to where people say that they understand that you can't email, but they shouldn't expect you to email back at 10 p.m. But, where's the value system in a lot of workplaces? It's like, oh, the person who does that, it gets rewarded, but not usually commiserate to or compensatory to what they're doing. And, so, I mean, there's a high stress assumption. I remember reading that this theory years ago. It was a book about sleep quality, and they said that we've been at war against sleep ever since the light bulb was invented, because one thing that was invented almost as soon as the light bulb was shift work. It was like, now we can stay open forever, theoretically, because we have light in our business. So one of the many ways in which Thomas Edison was, kind of a jerk. No, sorry, that's a whole different rabbit hole. Tweet at me if you have, opinions about that. So anyway, getting into that. So it's interesting where you're just seeing those symptoms looking back. Does that match other people's, like, they don't realize it while it's going on?
Oh, I think most of the time when I meet people who are burnt out, I'm actually more shocked if they know that they are than if they don't. I think most people don't know they're burnt out. And I guess, yes. So I guess my story in some ways is therefore textbook, that looking back now, I say, oh yeah, I was totally burnt out. But I just didn't know it. And thank goodness for me, I think I did some things that really worked well for me and helped me break free from perpetually burning myself out. And I think part of it is just, I had a yoga and meditation practice for a long time. So I like to think my decision making for a while has been pretty intentional and not reactive. So like when I decided to make a career change, I didn't willy-nilly that decision. And then I think part of my own sort of burnout sort of recovery or prevention has been also going into work being a therapist. I mean, and a DBT oriented therapist, right? We are steeped in strategy and coping skills every day of our lives. So you have
it's all
to
about
be
skills with DBT. Yeah.
So to not also absorb and use those, I think I would actually have to try really hard, to not practice what I preach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting where now I've read about these surveys that there's a record number of people in the US who are tired of their job or don't like their career or want to change, or in some cases already have changed. And I think the pandemic forced that issue for a lot of people to where it was forefront on their minds, because so many industries took a hit, layoffs, some people had to switch. I also feel like there are people who had to survive one way or the other, and so they found out, I'm surviving maybe without my job that laid me off. Now I'm not going to go back to it. And whatever. It's just kind of a big, but there's way more people that are dissatisfied than there probably are easy solutions for career changes, unless we're just going to swap people. I don't know, but I'm curious about that dissatisfaction. How much do you think that plays into things, and what are some of your experiences with it?
Yeah, I think years ago, I read something, don't ask me where, because, it was years ago, that in America, stress had become a status symbol. So
Isn't
much
that
the
fascinating?
way,
Yeah.
So much the way, like in theory, we look at the metaphorical, like white picket fence with the house and the dog and the 2.5 kids, or what kind of car you're driving. We also unintentionally been trained to believe that stress equals success. And so I think that that's been going on for a really long time. And then coupled with everything that you're talking about with COVID, I think people have just really started to shift the paradigm in terms of, is that really what we want? Do we really want to sign up for a lifetime of being stressed out? Mm-hmm. I tell my own clients, the World Health Organization published something within the past year that said, working 55 hours a week or more is hazardous to your health to the point that it statistically increases your chances of death.
Yeah, I'm amazed, and this has come up with a lot of people that I'm talking to recently, and even I think it's hit on a couple of the episodes here on the show. But I'm amazed by how many issues are literally life or life quality of life threatening, or even like life on the planet. I mean, pick some environmental things that there's whatever different opinions people have out there. There's definitely environmental concerns and economic concerns and human rights concerns and all these things throughout the world. And if we actually stop and say, hey, our system is killing us, shouldn't we talk about that? The reaction you get a lot of times is people going like, oh, geez, here we go. Don't stop me. I got to get I got to gas up my car and get coffee before I hit work. And if I don't get there on time, it's, they're going to, and I might have to drop my elementary school kid off early. And I hope that there's something going on the playground enough that they'll be a half hour early and it won't be a problem. And all those things. It's like we're in such a hurry that we just go, let's not talk about that. It's like, well, we're going to die. We're years earlier, and we're not allowed to talk about it socially.
Yeah, and I think when COVID happened, it caused a lot of us to pause, and a lot of people went into extreme stress because they're working from home with their spouses and trying to also teach their kids. And I don't know, stress is tricky, right? Because you're a therapist. We actually need stress. Mm-hmm. Stress is super motivating. If we didn't ever have stress, we would just lounge around all day in the sunshine and get nothing done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that would be a problem too.
I'd like to talk to people when I'm talking stress or anxiety, kind of, I'll have people map out a 1 to 10. And I'll say, let's talk about, it's somewhat subjective. Well, it's 100% subjective because it's a made up scale that they rate on their own. It's like, and it's kind of easy to think to ourselves, okay, 10, what are a handful of the worst, most stressful times of my life? That's a 10, 1 is like very little. 0 is like, I'm asleep basically, cause like you said, I get up in the morning and I got to pick out what I'm going to wear. It's not hugely on my stress radar, but it's there, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you're Christopher Nolan, who wears the same outfit every day because he's a creative genius. That's why, apparently. And so it saves brain power. So we get up and we got to do something, right? Mm-hmm. And I like to look at it and say, let's say that our 5 is tenuous and tricky, but anything under 5 is tolerable and we can still work while we're doing it. Anything above 5 is my work is now getting damaged by my level of anxiety or stress. So tell me now, how bad is that advice that I'm giving people? Is that going to, screw up how many people would you say?
Oh, everyone's so screwed now. Anyone who's gotten that advice from Dwight, unlearn it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think we live in a world, I think, where we're just naturally taught to think that things are this way or they're that way. So if we're trying not to be stressed, then the natural flip side is like all stress is bad. And I think it's all about just understanding the impact of stress and trying to find the right spectrum to exist in. With that said, I think part of the struggle that I observe is because of what we're saying with stress being a status symbol and being so much a part of our daily lives, and then being even further sort of pushed along by all of the COVID sort of experiences. I think people are so used to being stressed. It's kind of like when you're driving home and you take the same route every day and your brain just checks out, as therapists, we'd say disassociating, an average daily experience of disassociating. You drive that route every day and you can do it without even thinking about it. And you can get home and not even remember your ride, Yeah. I feel like that's how a lot of people are now with stress. And I think that's why so many people are burnt out. Is like, I'm just so used to this. I don't even know that I'm stressed. I don't even interpret this as stress. This is just life. And
I remember being in a community mental health agency, and we had so many people who were moved into positions of leadership who would, and I always, if I was to do an unflattering impression of it, and I'm not going to say that I'm completely never been here either, I would pile up a couple books here, grab a magazine, grab my keys, grab the cup of water, bottled water, and then you walk in with on your cell phone balanced in another hand. You put everything down, unload this, unload that, take a phone call real quick, all of that kind of, and that was held up, as you put it, like that's desirable. It's like, oh, you got it. You got so much going on and you're balancing it all. Wow. And it's like, well, that second part that I'm balancing it all is an illusion usually. And that's where, do you feel like this feeds into imposter syndrome and some of those things where we feel like we can't accomplish things? It's a whole nother topic, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think when stress is how we measure our success, I think it's easy to feel like we're not successful if we're not stressed out. And so I think, feeling like an imposter can sort of fuel the part of you that has to overcompensate constantly and push and learn, So if you can work on overcoming your imposter syndrome, I think feeling comfortable in who you are and where you're at frees you from the pressure you need to just perform, learn, grow, do better. Because I think that will certainly burn you out. And I can speak to a lot of my clients who are burnt out. Certainly, they don't come into working with me saying like imposter syndrome is the thing that I need to work on, but it definitely comes up in my work with my clients who are burnt out that a lot of them do have imposter syndrome. And that can be, I think, a driving force in how they maybe unintentionally perpetuate their own burnout. Because I think burnout is complicated. It's something that sort of happens to us and is sort of created by the world around us. In the ICD-11, they label burnout as a syndrome. It's not a disorder, it's a syndrome. And for me, I think the way I interpret that is like, it's something that happens to you because of what's going on around you. And also there are things within you that definitely can leave you more vulnerable or can cause you to perpetuate it. There's like imposter syndrome.
Yeah. There's a lot of problems that we sort of treat that way as if it happened. I think society's getting a little bit better with addiction as it's something that happened or something that, I'm trying to say, instead of, addiction and some of the depression and some of the disenfranchisement people feel from society, we look at it as inevitable instead of, we could probably work on that. And, they say the same with like budgeting, diet, any of those kind of habits and habitual changes. One of the reasons that studies show people do very badly at changing those things is because they don't address the psychological elements in those things. How big is a sense of hopelessness or I almost want to say impotence in the situation to say, I'm in this situation. I don't like what I'm doing. I'm burned out, but I can't think of what to do about it. I have obstacles in my way or whatever. When getting to that hopeless stage, how big of a role does that play?
How big of a role does that play? How?
In the way that people feel when they feel trapped, I guess, what does that do to their burnout, I guess?
Well, I think it's definitely, burnout basically has three main components. The first component is emotional exhaustion. The second component is depersonalization, which basically means just feeling out of touch, not as connected, to your work or the things that you normally care about. Yes. And then the third is a decreased sense of accomplishment. In our profession, they love to put things in clinical language that like don't actually show what that looks like in real life all the time. But I would say, decreased sense of accomplishment, that can get people feeling pretty hopeless, right? They're like, I have all these things that I like wanted to do with my life and I'm not. or I'm in this job, for example, that is not fulfilling me. And I know I should be doing something to make things better, but I can't, I don't have the energy. And I think it's like so many things. I think it's on a spectrum. I know I've had clients who have felt like I used to love my job and now I don't. Mm-hmm. And that feels terrible. I'm pretty hopeless about that because I don't know what the heck happened. The job actually didn't change, but I changed.
Isn't that, it's one of the more significant decisions we make in our life. And I find that is even more so true if you're in a job that is sort of you can call it an identity job, you can call it a calling type of job, or just something that has very specific training that doesn't really necessarily easily translate to something else. If I have if someone has an MBA, they can take some hope maybe in saying, I could find another leadership position somewhere across industries, right? If someone is a dentist or a therapist or a police officer or some of those things that are very, very specific, maybe they've had a dream of doing it, maybe they like the identity. Maybe in some ways, I went to graduate school with a lot of people that was a second career change and they were getting their degree and license and they're already very educated, kind of like your experience, right? And teachers would be another one. Anyway, just lots those jobs to where it's like there's not an easy switch. And I've defined myself by this identity for so long, even before I worked in the job. And I find that's sometimes even more pressure and stress to say, how would I actually change? Do I go and get the intro level income at some new industry? How am I going to do that? How would I afford that?
Yeah. And I think to those people, I would say, because burnout is complicated, I think that is both a bad thing and a good thing. It is something that, has many contributing factors. And like I shared, part of my own burnout contribution has been like just how I live my life and approach my business and I work with my clients.
Yeah.
So I don't think if you're burnt out, it means you have to necessarily change careers. I guess that's why it doesn't necessarily, to me, as the observer and the person who's lived through it, has to be so hopeless. I think something has to change, but it's different for everybody. And that doesn't mean it has to be, okay, I'm not going to be a metaphorical dentist anymore. It could change just how are you running your business?
Yeah.
What hours are you keeping? What insurances are you contracting with? What's your staffing situation look like? Where's your office located? Do you live somewhere you hate? And you're like a dentist, but every day you get out of work and you work in some place that just doesn't fulfill you. And there's nothing to sort of enrich your life when you're not at the office doing your dental work. Maybe you can still be a dentist, but you need to move.
And that's a really interesting way to say. So it's not for some reason it's somehow not mentally healthy to think in extremes, is what you're saying. It's a pretty radical way we're broaching that. But isn't it funny how much we get trapped into that and thinking like, I remember when somebody moved into our neighborhood when I was younger, and my mom mentioned that she talked to them, got to know them, and they had purchased a home in our neighborhood because it was a lower cost. They had moved into Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, from down the road in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which, yes, the chocolate place. And it was more expensive to live there. And so they moved so that the guy, the husband of, the family or whatever, he hated his job, and his job made him a lot of money. And he switched to a job that made less money that he liked a lot more. So they moved they proactively, before he quit, moved to a place that cost less. And the way my mom said that, and it was interesting to see, even as a kid, how that was, and my mom appreciated that as a out-of-the-box thinking. And it's like, wow, that's out-of-the-box thinking. We're not trained to do that. We got to move up, 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 up. And all that time we spent in school is supposed to pay off with a very certain expectation. And we either hit it or don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And all I can say is I've seen enough anecdotal evidence that when we're willing to think outside of the box, I think there's just more available to us than we realized. Like I had a client who was in athletics, making a living in athletics, but unless you're a big deal in athletics, you're not making a lot of money in athletics.
Yeah.
And you're very tied into other people's schedules, right? Because there's always events.
Yeah. Oh,
and you're
yeah. And
always
it's always
supposed to be
weekends,
available.
holidays. Yeah.
Absolutely, and they were feeling pretty hopeless, about their career, because they're like, this is what everything I thought I wanted. And I hate that I don't have free time, like for my friends and family. And I don't even make a good enough living to then like have fun when I'm not working. But we did a lot of exactly what we're saying is like checking in with your values, thinking outside of the box. And long story short, they still in some ways work in athletics, but they work in athletic technology now.
Oh, wow.
So they basically, it's really interesting. And they actually, I don't even fully understand it because I'm not a tech person, but they work with some sort of technology that athletes use, and they're on the tech side of it. And they love it because it provides them with so much more freedom and flexibility. They can kind of travel and work from wherever they want. They're still connected into this community that's really important to them because they have been a long-standing athlete. But they're also like making a living wage and they have their free time. And they're feeling very successful, which sometimes they are like, I can't believe that I'm actually feeling like a successful, functioning human adult with a job that I like, because I know how I felt a year or two ago.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm curious what your thoughts are about the dream position, or the whole if you find something you love, you don't work a day in your life, that kind of thing, or how should somebody feel? How much do they feel as fulfilled as they should, and what does that mean? I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Like accommodation of maybe some harsh realities, limitations, and on the other hand, not giving up. So solve that problem for us.
Here, we're going to solve it right now. Well, I think it's different for everybody. So some people, they don't need to love what they do. And my poor husband, he gets used as a metaphorical example for my coaching clients and my therapy clients all the time. But long story short, my husband's an electrician. He has a skill. He also has ADHD. So a skill where you are like working with your hands is so perfect for him.
Absolutely.
But if he were here, he would tell you he doesn't really care like where he works. He just wants to show up and like do his electrical thing. Right. So I don't necessarily think he loves what he does, but he doesn't not love what he does. He doesn't have a strong personal connection to it. He's just happy to show up and like tap into a skill set every day and then go home.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Other people are very values based. I am one of these people, probably not surprising being a therapist.
Right.
It's really important to me that I love the work that I do. So for me, the metaphorical punching of a time card and just like doing something just to do it would never be fulfilling for me. I need to like what I do. With that said, right, the question you're asking about the dream job, I think is any job perfect 100% of the time? Are you going to love your job literally every moment of every day? No, because I guess what we're uncovering about Nikolai is she is clearly a dialectical thinking therapist where it's like there's just gray area all the time.
Yeah.
Nothing is all or nothing. You're not going to love your job all the time. Hopefully you don't hate your job all the time, right? But if you can love your job most days, I think that's good because, you never know what you could sleep badly. You could have a client go through a really tough experience. Your direct deposit could not come in and now you don't have a paycheck.
Yeah, especially private practice with insurances. Am I right?
That's not ever happened to us.
No, I've always
But like,
said
you
they're
think
just
you're gonna
cool.
like love a day like that? You know,
Yeah.
you think you're gonna be like, oh, I love my job today when there was a computer glitch and I just didn't get paid. I love it.
I like to look at it like this is another fake scale, but a crummy job is going to be like 50% or less things that I like. A decent job is going to be 60, anywhere from 60 to 80 is actually pretty good. Anywhere 80 plus, and there's no such thing as 100, right? Is like, that's the dream. That's a dream to me. It's like, wow, if you spend 80% of your time doing things you love instead of things you hate, and 20% of the time doing things that are uncomfortable or maybe you even kind of hate, that's really good, actually, in a lot of situations.
Yeah. And I read something during the pandemic, some research that was coming out just about job satisfaction and happiness in the workplace. And they were saying that people really only need to love about a third of what they do.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
If you love a third of what you do, that is enough to sustain people. Now, I'd like to think the other 70% is not stuff you hate. I'd like to think if you love about a third of it and you like maybe the other third, even if you hate the last third, that's like a pretty strong buffer of I like my job. I'm satisfied.
And
I was talking to my women's group about how one of the women's a financial advisor, so they love talking about retirement. And I was saying, like, I'm not ever planning to retire because, like, I like my job. When I'm older, I'd like to maybe work less. That'd be nice, right? But I don't know. I think that says something. If I'm like, I'll just work until literally my bones break and I can't do it anymore.
I always like to ask all guests if there is a charity or a nonprofit or something that they would encourage people to look into, to support, that type of thing. And then, of course, always want to know where people can be reached and found as well when they're nice enough to come on the podcast. You got to plug that. So do you have any kind of a charitable organization that is near and dear to you?
Yes, I do. So I was just listening to your episode that you did with the woman who's the forensic psychologist.
Oh, yes. Lots of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just listened to that yesterday. It was very good. And I appreciate it because I think many therapists, many of us are interested in the forensic side of things. So it was fun for me to listen to, but I knew the question was coming because I heard you ask her the
I never prep
question.
anyone. I just do it. So.
But I was like, I'm going to have to think.
You passed my test of listening to the previous episodes.
I did. And I thought, I actually support a few charities myself. But the charity that is most near and dear to me, which is going to sound weird because it's very Rhode Island, is a charity called Save the Bay. And you can find them at, savebay.org. That's my dog. Apologies.
He just feels strongly about Save the Bay.
I do. Yes. I love this because we do a lot of environmental work with cleaning up our oceans. And although they're Rhode Island specific, they've done a lot for the state of Rhode Island in cleaning up our waterways. And actually, it's pretty cool. There are places here where we used to not be able to shellfish, and now we can again because they've done such a great job. So I think if people aren't even interested in supporting them, no matter what state you're in, looking into the work that they do, I think more states doing similar work would be really great for our environment. And I think they're a great model to look to that seems to be having a real impact on the environment here that we're able to witness the effects of every day here in my home state.
That's really great. I want to second that too. If people are in another state and they're trying to push for something, a working program in another state is a great way to share, even because it's just as simple as sending a website to the representatives that you're trying to influence, right? Or trying to share and say, this is working over in Rhode Island. You should check it out. And that's more powerful than just saying like, do something.
Yeah. Yeah. Like here's what they do in Rhode Island. Maybe we could replicate it. And actually, I have a friend who's a mental health advocate, and she's coming to visit me. She lives in Massachusetts, but Rhode Island, we also have a lot of good local food access. And we have this organization here. I'll plug another one, farmfreshri.org, where they help bring local farmers together with the people who want to buy their food. And they do a lot of indoor farmers markets. They have like a really cool 365 days a year indoors farmers market that you can go to in Providence. And I have a friend who's like trying to bring something like that to her area of Massachusetts. And I said, come to Rhode Island. I'll take you to the Farm Fresh Rhode Island market. And then hopefully you can steal all of their ideas. I don't think they will be mad about it.
You said a minute ago, you were saying it specifically, but it sounds like it's generally true. Let's do it the Rhode Island way. It sounds like all of us should be doing a lot of the things the Rhode Island way. So
it's, I'm not from Rhode Island originally, but I've been here for many years and clearly I am a fan.
Well, other than going to the Rhode Island Tourism Board website, which is where you can find a lot of the information that we're sharing on this Rhode Island Fancast that this has become. I'm always trying to adapt the show into new and other themes, but so I appreciate that. Now, where can people go to find you?
Yes, so people can find me. My website is www.fromburnout2balance.life. You can also find me on Facebook. Nikolai Blino, LMHC is my Facebook page. And on Instagram, you can find me. My Instagram handle is Nikolai Diana, Diana, which is my middle name.
Great. Well, wonderful. And you're doing some real important work. I appreciate the people that are focusing on this because, frankly, it goes beyond just the individuals and even just the local communities. But overall, I mean, the greater good economy, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of things that as people are happier, more well-adjusted, and as we witness in mental health all the time, able to work, their quality of life goes up and those are around them as well. And also the system is more likely to work better when we're all engaged with it. So that's my plug for mental health in general. So, and also specifically with what you're doing. Everybody out there, really want to thank you for listening and being a part of this. Would love to hear any of your experiences or stories. You can tweet at the show at Break-A-Brain on Twitter. You can go to our Facebook group, facebook.com/breakabrain, or on Instagram, at Brainiacs Ahoy is the name that I was able to land upon for Instagram. Any of those places, and make sure to reach out and let us know if there's things that we should be covering, or if you have experiences with burnout, things you'd like to either share, write it down, or maybe we'll even talk. So make sure to reach out. And if you want to become involved in the show, you can always go to patreon.com/breakabrain. Sorry, let me back up. That was the Twitter handle. Patreon.com/brokenbrain. It's just the name of the show. And you can help to support that and get some bonus materials as well, including the video of the interviews that we have that sometimes is shared in other formats, but always goes up for all patrons. You get to see the behind the curtain, how we are. Visually as well as auditorily. Anyway, auditorily saying a fake word that's not a great pronunciation is a good way to go out. So thank you again, Nikolai. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it as well.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtamparts.com.